It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and this is Monster Mondays, presented by Film Seizure. After I discussed Dracula's Daughter last month and touched upon the concept of the lesbian vampire yet again, I figured that maybe I should go to yet another of the more known films in the subgenre of vampire mythos. Not only will I get to talk about Vampyros Lesbos from 1971, I also get to talk about a particular favorite European filmmaker of mine, Jess Franco, and his interesting and gorgeous star, Soledad Miranda. Jess Franco wavered between artistic black and white thrillers in the earlier to mid-60s to doing more direct erotic exploitation in the 70s to just simply pumping out horror films. It's fair to say that Franco probably enjoyed three distinct careers. It's hard to imagine that something like The Diabolical Dr. Z, which is a combination of Hitchcockian thriller, moody black and white horror, and revenge film, and Two Female Spies with Flowered Panties, a softcore porno action movie, came from the same person. Then add to that a later film than both of those that goes by the name of Oasis of the Zombies, which is one of the very worst movies I've ever seen. And you've got a bizarre career that spanned a solid 50 years. Oh, and, well, for a shameless plug, all three of those movies I just mentioned, I've written about them over at my website, bmovieenema.com, so check it out. Franco was born in Madrid of Cuban and Mexican heritage. He studied film and went to work in the mid-50s as an assistant director. And he worked with several known Spanish directors on about 20 films in 4 years. Yeah, it should be noted that Franco, and perhaps maybe the entirety of Spanish cinema, works exceptionally fast on several films a year. There are years in the height of his career that Franco would crank out 7 or 8 films or more in a single year. Hell, in 1973, he's credited with 12 films. He made 1 movie per month that year. It would have been 13, but he didn't finish one of the projects that he was going to make. That's insane. And despite working so hard so fast on movies in his career, Franco has an interesting style. He knows how to use setting and eroticism, and, well, eroticism is where we are with this week's film, but more on that later. Without a doubt, probably the biggest takeaway from Vampyros Lesbos is the star, Soledad Miranda. Miranda was born in 1943 by the name Soledad Rendon Bueno. She only changed her last name to Miranda at the age of 16 when she drew a stage name from a hat. In her teens, she spent a lot of time in the tabloids as the rumored girlfriend of the bullfighter El Cordobés, Manuel Benitez. And from 1960 to 1970, she appeared in some 30 films, but took a couple of years off to raise a son that she had with husband Jose Manuel Simoes. Simoes was a Portuguese race car driver, and he drove race cars. She was one of the most beautiful actresses that I've ever seen, and they made some movies together. So yeah, I can see this being a decent pairing of people. Now, unfortunately, on the morning of August 18, 1970, a small collision between the car Simoes was driving and a small truck killed Miranda. He survived the incident with minor scrapes and bruises and cuts, but she suffered major head and back trauma, and she was only 27 years old at the time. Having been in a handful of Jess Franco's films at the end of her life, she was quickly becoming his absolute go-to star, but her death left him heartbroken. With the sudden new interest in exploitation in European films becoming more and more available, despite the subject matter tending to be much more erotic in nature, Miranda's late work with Jess Franco has propelled her to far more stardom than she likely would have ever had. The movie begins with a very interesting artistic dance performance. Countess Nadine Carody, played by Miranda, performs this interpretive dance number with a woman who appears to be pretending to be a mannequin. The performance is at a nightclub and does involve a considerable amount of nudity and lots of lady-on-lady touching. Linda Westinghouse, played by Ava Stromberg, is having dreams of Countess Carody. The dreams often cause Linda to reach orgasm. So imagine her surprise when she sees the Countess performing at the nightclub. Now, Linda has a psychiatrist that instead of writing down notes, he just doodles stick figures on his paper and then ends up telling her that maybe she needs to go out and get herself a lover. A better lover than the boyfriend that she has. But Linda is sent a note to go to a remote island to see Countess Carity about an inheritance. It's really just a ploy by the Countess, who has set her eyes on Linda. She's warned not to go to the island, that death lives there. That man, played by Franco himself, asks her to come to the wine cellar where he will tell her more. But when she gets there, she walks in on him torturing a woman. So at this point, Linda decides that, maybe that guy isn't trustworthy, so she's just going to go on to her original destination. And when she arrives, she initially believes that Nadine's home is empty. But when she sees some blood dripping onto the window, she flees, but Nadine is waiting for her on the deck where she is sunbathing. She takes Linda skinny dipping before getting down to business of this inheritance that Nadine has received from the Dracula family. Yeah, Nadine Carity is directly connected to the main man, Big Cheese, Count D himself. She comments on how much he left for her, and Nadine gives Linda wine, which causes Linda to get dizzy and passes out. She takes the unconscious lady to her room where the pair have sex, and then Nadine feeds from Linda. Nadine explains to her henchman, Morpho, that for a couple of 100 years since Dracula initiated her into the vampire way of life, that she has done everything for herself. She's bewitched women primarily because, she hates men, to her first sexual experience being a pillaging soldier who was raping her. So she stole the identities of the women that she's bewitched and became them before basically consuming their identity completely and their life force. With Linda, though, it's Nadine who's under her spell instead. She wants to bring Linda into the vampire circle, and that's what she attempts to do. She uses her power to call Linda to her, and they have more sex, and this time she gives Linda a taste of blood to initiate her. Meanwhile, there's this lady named Agra at the hospital being treated by Dr. Seward. Agra was the wife of the Jess Franco character, and she's gone completely insane and can feel whenever Nadine does things because she's one of those people that Nadine has begun to consume. Well, the reason why Jess Franco is torturing girls is because every woman who goes to the island is driven insane. This, in turn, has driven him insane, so he goes around the island killing random women. Additionally, Dr. Seward isn't just knowledgeable about vampires, he wants to become one. So he's been treating the women in the hopes that Nadine will come to him and change him. And, she does eventually, but she refuses and has her goon Morpho kill him. After killing Jess Franco's character, Linda goes to Nadine, and Nadine is desperate for blood, and Linda refuses it to her. Instead, refusing to become a vampire, she runs a pole through Nadine's eye to kill her. And Linda is then found by her boyfriend, who basically tries to convince her that everything that's happened is just a dream. So let's get to my 3 things that I like about Vampyros Lesbos. First, this movie doesn't really try to get too cute with its premise. I mean, first of all, the title itself tells us we're going to see some sexy lesbian action between 2 very pretty ladies. Okay, great. I'm on board with that. It ties in some Dracula stuff, but it doesn't do it in a really goofy way. Instead, it just kind of borrows similar ideas. Dracula starts with a transaction of land. That basically is what's going on here. Dracula's dead, and he's left the Countess all his stuff. And Linda is there to complete the transaction and is caught in the vampire's web. Then the Agra character, under the care of Dr. Seward, which is himself yet another reference to the Dracula story, is basically the Renfield character. She speaks to Nadine via telepathy. She's a raving lunatic, desperate for the vampire's attentions, etc. You had me at lesbian vampires. I'm just staying for the nods to Dracula. Now, second, yeah, I mean, come on, this movie is pretty erotic. However, it's more than just what you think. Anyone can make a softcore movie with lesbians, with vampires for that matter. However, the movie goes more psychosexual in its premise. Nadine haunts dreams, but not just that, she seduces and controls you through dreams. Beyond that, some of the editing is a little awkward too, but on purpose. You're switching from one setting to the next that might be a different time, it might be happening concurrently, it's just bizarre. Days seem to pass and you don't realize it, I mean, other than a character saying that Linda looks like she is feeling better than she was the day before. Was that a whole day or multiple days that have passed? It becomes this dreamlike state that you're trapped in. Also, the use of the soundtrack is bizarre and jarring too. So it's also, fairly jarring when there's no soundtrack, because because the music that's used sometimes is very hard edged, and some of the music stings or the music that's more associated with Nadine is just, it has like this kind of razor cut to it, and there's like this chanting in it, and it's very jarring. But then when there is no music, you get a little bit of that feeling of pins and needles. It's almost unnerving. So it really does feel less like a real narrative and something that is partially an erotic dream and a nightmare. In a lot of ways, that's how the Dracula novel was written, with these various points of views from these different periods in time, shifting the perspective of the story. It kind of does that here. Now, third, holy cow, Soledad Miranda is something else. She's incredibly seductive in this. What I find most interesting about her in this movie is how understated she is. She's cool as a cucumber all the way through this. When Linda first gets to her place, she doesn't smile. She barely acknowledges her beyond a simple hello. When she recounts her story to Morpho about being raped but saved by Count Dracula and what she's done with the power that he gave her since, she's barely emoting. It's creepy and also incredibly sexy. It's like she knows that she's the sexiest thing in Turkey during the 5 weeks they filmed this movie there, and that is all part of her power. It likely doesn't hurt that she is completely unattainable too, because, well, in the story of the movie, she despises men. So, sorry guys, you ain't gonna be turned into no vampire by her and live with her forever. She hates you. Sorry. It's just, she's really good in this, and it's a shame that she died so young, but she is absolutely gorgeous. I will say that I also have a brand new appreciation for women who dress in all black and wear really, really long red scarves like she does in this movie. She just fantastic. Well, that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday and a new installment of Monster Mondays each Monday on FilmSeizure.com, as well as places where fine podcasts are found, like SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. Additionally, hop on over to Facebook and Twitter to follow us by just searching for Film Seizure. You can also check out new posts at my website, bmovieenema.com, each and every Friday. So, until next week, stay spooky.